The morning of my wedding, I checked my phone and saw 3 missed calls from my father. At first, I thought he was calling to say he was already on the way. Instead, his voicemail made my hands shake. "Your sister needs us. The twins are sick. We can't make it today." For a moment, I just stared at the screen. My parents had promised for months that nothing would keep them from my wedding. Yet somehow, my sister's family came first again. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. But before that day was over, I made a decision. And a month later, I handed Dad the keys he never expected back. I'm Rachel, 34 years old, and for as long as I can remember, my parents treated my older sister, Melissa, like the center of the universe. When Melissa won a school award, my parents threw a party. When I graduated near the top of my class, they congratulated me with a quick phone call because they were busy helping Melissa move into a new apartment.
It was always like that.
Birthdays, holidays, family gatherings, somehow everything revolved around her. At first, I fought for their attention. Later, I stopped trying. Instead, I focused on building my own life. That decision turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. 3 years before my wedding, I met Daniel. He was kind, patient, and the first person who noticed when something bothered me, even when I tried to hide it. When he proposed, I felt happier than I ever had. For the first time, I believed I was starting a family where everyone mattered equally. To my surprise, my parents seemed genuinely excited. My mother cried when she saw the ring. My father hugged Daniel and promised they would be sitting in the front row on our wedding day. For months, everything seemed perfect. Or at least that's what I wanted to believe. Looking back, the warning signs were everywhere. My parents skipped wedding planning lunches because Melissa needed help with her twins. They canceled a venue visit because one of the children had a soccer game. Even when we discussed seating arrangements, the conversation somehow turned into stories about Melissa's family. Daniel noticed it immediately. "Are you sure they're going to show up?" he asked one evening. "Of course they will," I replied. I wanted to believe it. The week before the wedding, both of my parents promised nothing would keep them away. Then the wedding morning arrived. As I sat in the bridal suite getting ready, my phone buzzed. It was a voicemail from my father. I listened once, then twice, then a third time. My hands started shaking. They weren't coming. Melissa's twins were sick, and my parents had decided they needed them more than I did. Hours later, during the reception, my phone lit up again. It was a photo from Dad, and the sight of it made my heart sink. I opened the photo and immediately wished I hadn't. My father was sitting on Melissa's couch with one twin on each knee. My mother stood beside him, smiling as if it were any ordinary family day. The caption read, "The kids are feeling much better now." That was it. No apology. No mention of my wedding. No acknowledgement that they had missed one of the most important days of my life. I locked my phone and slipped it into my purse before anyone else noticed. Daniel saw the change in my expression immediately. "What happened?" he asked quietly. I showed him the picture. For a moment, he just stared at it. Then, he shook his head. "I don't know how you've put up with this for so many years." Honestly, neither did I. After our honeymoon, things only became worse. Melissa posted dozens of photos online showing my parents spending the entire weekend with her children. Friends and relatives filled the comments section. Best grandparents ever. Such a beautiful family. Every compliment felt like a tiny reminder that my wedding hadn't mattered enough. That was when something inside me finally broke. The truth was, my parents had depended on me far more than they realized. 6 years earlier, when my father lost his job and money became tight, I had quietly stepped in. I purchased a modest 3-bedroom house and invited them to live there. They paid no rent. I covered property taxes. I handled major repairs. When the roof leaked, I paid for it. When the furnace failed, I paid for that too. The house was legally mine, but over the years my parents started acting as though it belonged to them. And maybe part of me allowed it because I kept hoping their appreciation would eventually turn into love. Instead, nothing changed. A week after returning from our honeymoon, I drove to the house. My parents welcomed me inside, as if everything were normal. During dinner, my father smiled and said the same words he had repeated my entire life. "Family comes first." I looked directly at him. Then maybe it's time everyone starts carrying their share. 3 days later, a certified envelope arrived at their front door. And everything changed. The certified envelope contained documents neither of my parents expected to see. The house had officially been listed for sale. Within an hour, my phone started ringing. First Dad, then Mom, then Dad again. I let every call go to voicemail. For years, I had rushed to solve their problems. This time, I wanted them to sit with the consequences of their choices. When I finally answered, my father sounded furious. Tell me this is some kind of mistake. It isn't, I replied calmly. You can't do this. I can. The house belongs to me. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then came the guilt, the disappointment, the accusations. My mother cried. My father said I was tearing the family apart. Melissa called and told me I was overreacting. According to her, missing my wedding had been unavoidable. I listened quietly. Then I ended the conversation. Over the next few weeks, relatives began contacting me. Some urged me to reconsider. Others said family should forgive family. Not one of them had walked down an aisle wondering why their parents hadn't shown up. Not one of them had spent years being treated as the backup daughter. Daniel stood beside me through all of it. Whenever I doubted myself, he reminded me that setting boundaries wasn't cruelty. It was self-respect. A month later, the house sold. The buyers planned major renovations and wanted possession as soon as possible. There would be no delays, no exceptions, no second chances. I arranged to meet my parents one final time. When I arrived, they were already waiting at the kitchen table. Neither looked happy. Without saying a word, I placed a set of keys on the table between us.
Dad stared at them.
Mom looked confused. The sale is final, I said softly. You have 90 days to move. My mother's eyes filled with tears. My father looked completely stunned. After everything we've done for you? Mom whispered. I took a deep breath. This isn't about one wedding. It's about a lifetime of being second place. For the first time, neither of them had an answer. But an even bigger shock was still coming. Melissa had no intention of helping them. At first, my parents were convinced Melissa would help them. After all, she was the daughter they had always prioritized. The one whose needs came first. The one they had rearranged their lives around for decades. So when the reality of moving out finally set in, they turned to her for support. The conversation didn't go the way they expected. Melissa said her house was already too crowded. Then she said the twins needed stability. A few days later, she claimed her husband wasn't comfortable with the idea. Every week brought a different excuse. For the first time, my parents found themselves hearing the same word I had heard my entire life.
No.
As their move-out date approached, reality became impossible to ignore. The daughter they had constantly sacrificed for wasn't willing to make even a small sacrifice for them. Meanwhile, I stayed respectful, but kept my distance. I wasn't celebrating their situation. I wasn't trying to punish them. I simply refused to rescue them from consequences they had created themselves. One evening, my father called and asked if we could meet. When I arrived, both of my parents looked older than I remembered. Dad spoke first. I spent weeks blaming you, he admitted. Then I realized something. I waited. You weren't angry because we missed your wedding. He lowered his eyes. You were hurt because we missed your entire life. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then my mother started crying. She apologized for every recital, graduation, birthday, and milestone they had treated as less important. Not excuses. Not explanations. An actual apology. Months later, they moved into a smaller apartment and started attending family counseling sessions. The changes weren't instant, but they were real. Then, during a family gathering, my father stood in front of everyone and did something I never expected. He publicly apologized, not just for the wedding, for years of favoritism. As I looked around the room, I realized something. Handing Dad those keys hadn't ended our family. It had finally forced us to face the truth. And sometimes, the truth is the only thing strong enough to unlock a new beginning.